Tonight, I'm very excited to welcome Sasha Bonét to celebrate the release of The Waterbearers, a memoir of mothers and daughters. Generations of Black women have borne children, borne the burdens of events untold, and borne witness to unspeakable trials. The Waterbearers carries this history, its fierce eloquence capturing a masterpiece of life written by an author who is intimately acquainted with how Black women have passed down knowledge and culture. Sasha Bonét is a writer and cultural critic based in New York City. Her criticism and essays have appeared in the Paris Review, New York Magazine, and Vogue, among many other publications. Bonét is a professor of creative writing for Columbia University and Barnard College. Bonét will be in conversation with literary tastemaker Glory Edim. In 2015, she founded Well Read Black Girl, an online platform and book club dedicated to celebrating the works of Black women authors. As an author herself, Edim has written the best-selling anthologies Well Read Black Girl, Finding Our Stories, Discovering Ourselves, and On Girlhood, 15 Stories from the Well Read Black Girl Library, and her recently published book, Gather Me. Please join me in welcoming to Politics and Prose, Sasha Bonét and Glory Edim. Settled here.
Hi, how are you?
Hi. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming.
We are going to, I just want to say thank you for being here and visiting us in Washington, D.C. Your book is so beautifully written, and I have so many questions for you. And we're going to also take questions from the audience. So if you have any questions, we'll pass the mic to you so you can share. But I just really want to start from the beginning. The title, Waterbearers, is just, I had so many thoughts on what direction that could go in. And when I started reading your memoir, it feels more than a memoir. It feels like a living history. And I really wanted to hear what inspired you to start with that title and to really do this like deep research into not only your own family's history, but this collective story of Black womanhood.
Thank you so much for being here, Glory. I wanted to talk about Black womanhood in America. I wanted to tell the story of Black womanhood. And I wasn't quite sure how to do that, but the research kept pulling me to motherhood. And I couldn't really break away from it. And I wanted to because I was young, I was a single mother. I didn't want my entire identity to be motherhood. But somehow I kept being pulled back. And in that research, I was able to understand that the reason I can't separate them is because that's always been the role of Black women in the nation. From the beginning, Black women's bodies were used like an industry, like a mill. So from the beginning, Black women have been identifying as mothers, and not just to their own children, but also to the children like on the plantations. So since the beginning of the empire, that's the history. And so I had to surrender to it. I had to surrender to where the research took me. And the research was so vast, and there was so much that I wanted to cover, and I wasn't quite sure how to shape the book. Mm-hmm. So I decided to use my family to go through history so I could kind of ground it in a personal narrative to make it kind of more tangible, more tactile, so you could be applying it to the people. And then I thought, but it can't just be my family, because I don't want it to the reader to think this is just my family story. So I thought if I expounded a bit, I could include cultural figures that people could identify with, like Betty Davis and Ona Judge, who was enslaved by George Washington's family. So starting from the very beginning, the first president of the United States owned this woman, tried to track her down when she ran away, and really spent a lot of time trying to keep his slaves. And what I thought was really interesting about this is he created policies around slavery to benefit his own personal estate, which I think still happens today, which is very much happening today with our current administration. And always when you look back at history, if you peel back a very thin veil, there's a Black woman there who wasn't written about, who no one spoke about, who helped this whole nation function and run, and was used as comfort women, and kind of did everything behind the scenes. And it was really hard to try to dig around and find those women. And a lot of times I was able to find them through the diaries of the slavers, which is also interesting, is that Black women occupied such a space in their imaginations and in their daily lives, but you don't see them in the history books.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to unearth those women, at least some of them, who got lost in history.
It was such a brilliant device because it kept making me pause where I wanted to learn more about each individual. Even the things that I thought I knew, I was so pleasantly surprised to learn more about Fred Hampton's mother. And that part, I just felt like my heart clenched because everything about his story and his place in history is directly connected to his mother, but I had never considered that prior. And then you have you mentioned Reese Taylor and that history and how that's, the connection with Rosa Parks. And again, history that is familiar to us, but you dig deeper and you allow us to kind of sit with it and really ponder the space of motherhood and this collective wisdom. And then the top of it, like that connects to your family, is just this beautiful archetype of Betty Jean and the freedom that she embodies. And this almost like I don't know how to explain it. She just seems so powerful, but also effortless. Like she was making decisions on her own accord. Whether it was right or wrong, it was her decision. And that kind of resilience and powerfulness reflects in each of the tributes that you have in the book as well. Can we talk about your grandmother and the power and how that really anchors the book in such a powerful way?
Thank you. I love my grandmother. Betty Jean is my grandmother. She really kind of gave me the permission. She was because in the Black family, or specifically my family, you don't talk about the past. You don't ask questions to the elders. You don't dredge up all that hurt. It's impolite. It's disrespectful. You're a child. Even though you're 35, you're still a child in the family. And so when I started speaking to her and she shared her story with me, it gave permission to my entire family to say, oh, okay, the matriarch has given us the green light. And everyone kind of started to fill in around her story. And she came from Louisiana. She was raised on a cotton plantation. She was a cotton tenant and then migrated to Houston, where she had my mother, and kind of started this urban life that was unfamiliar to her. Mm-hmm. But what's so special about her, and not just her, is everything, society, her family, her friends, everyone felt like her life was disposable. Mm-hmm. She was a mother. She had 11 children with 9 different men who she left, each one of them, to be a mother on her own. But she had this kind of sureness. She had this certainty, this knowing, this what Toni Morrison calls ancient properties. Yep. And she was always certain of herself, and she had this silent power, and she knew that if she was going to live, she was going to do it on her own terms. Yeah. And not on the terms of what someone told her she should do. And what's interesting is the government, the United States, the empire, used Black women's bodies in this way to make babies. And she kind of subverted that and decided that she was going to use her own body to build the world and the universe that she could be at the center of. And that's what she created in her home at 5010, which is like a character in the book. Yeah. It's her world where she reigns supreme. Mm-hmm. She's at the center. And that brought her all the joy in her life. Yeah.
There's a part where I'm always thinking about the origin story, like where people really start their books. And a lot of times people are thinking about the books for years, even before, the pencil hits the paper. They're constantly thinking about the story they're going to tell. And there's a scene where in chapter 2, you turn to your grandmother, you say, "Granny, what was your life before what was your life like in Louisiana? And she looked up at me as if she had been waiting her whole life for someone to ask. And I that gave me such pause, because that is like the question. It's a very simple question, but when you build this universe around you and you have children and you have responsibilities, there's no one turning to ask you that question. And you see that kind of echoed even with the relationship with your mother, with Connie, and how powerful a character she is, so resilient, so powerful, but at the same time, no one is turning inward to ask her that question. How did you really find a way to reflect so many different voices, so many different mothers, different types of mothers, from your grandmother to your own mother, to Artemis, to like so many beautiful characters, but the through line was motherhood? Can you take us a step into your craft process on how you shaped their viewpoints and how you made them feel whole characters?
Yeah, there is a foundation that exists. I felt that a part of it was, I'm on Instagram and I'm looking at all of these Black mama memes, and I'm like, do we all literally have the same mother? Like, my mom said that, like everybody's mom's saying the same things. So how is that? I was so curious about how that can be. And I'm talking about like across the world.
Yeah.
I'm not just talking about in the US, and so I thought that was super interesting. So there is a kind of foundation that's of sameness and culture. But then there's also these different ways that we each use our power within motherhood. And it's such a creative space, even for women who decide not to be mothers, like Camille Billups in the book. Yeah. So I wanted to take that foundation and then kind of tease it out a little bit and show the different ways that motherhood can exist within the Black community. And all of it really is coming from this place of wanting to protect. Even the things that seem harmful, it's coming from this place of, I'm going to do it to you before the world does, because the world is not nice. Yeah. And the world is not going to treat you sensitively. So I need to kind of build up your armor, build up the calluses so that you can survive. Yeah. And I wanted to show the different ways in which that could happen with the different women.
Yeah, I was taken, there's a part, and I'm going to do this without like spoiling different things, but there's this universal language I feel like Black women have through literature. There were so many different scenes where you reference a piece and I'm like, oh yes, like this makes complete sense, from the reference to Jamaica Kincaid Girl, to the reference to Audre Lorde and Litany for Survival. And it just made me think, we have this universal language. Yes. It's something that we all recognize, despite whether you're from the diaspora, Houston, Texas to Liberia, like we're speaking the same language. And you really capture it so beautifully using water, the bodies of water as that metaphor. Did you know that you wanted to start there, making, even with the confluence of the tributary, how do I pronounce it?
Tributaries.
Yeah, thank you. I want to think tributaries. Was when did that part come in when you decided to use that language? Because I thought that was really unique.
That came in the writing process. It wasn't necessarily at the beginning. I just the water kept showing up. So I'm writing about a woman, and then there's water, even with, like, for example, Jamaica Kincaid.
Yeah.
All of these women that I'm writing about, the water just shows up. Yeah. And I was like, why does this keep happening? And then I kind of started thinking about water and the femininity of water and the power of water. And I thought it aligned with the women, and I wanted to find a way to incorporate it. And it really became the frame for the book. And water is also this way that, like, for example, in Houston, water shapes where we live. Mm-hmm. So, for example, between Texas and Louisiana, there's the Sabine River. Mm-hmm. Between Louisiana and Mississippi, there's the Mississippi River. Water is also a kind of divider, and it shapes the way we occupy space. Yeah. And so I thought, it can shape this book in this way and help to navigate and guide me. And so much of the writing was really spiritual. Yeah. It wasn't necessarily that I had this strict plan. I would go into my little writing room every day, and I would sit at my altar, and I would just say, and I had all these photos of all my ancestors, and also like Maya Angelou and like James Baldwin. And I would sit there for like 20 minutes, and I would just kind of say, guide me, take me where you want me to be, show me the way, and I'll be brave. I'll go there. And I really, that's really a big part of the work, is just allowing myself to be guided.
Yeah, I appreciate you using the word brave, because some of the pieces are just so exposing, and it requires so much vulnerability. Can you talk about, I don't know if I want to use the word violence, but there is a violence that you're encountering when we're talking about the American history and Black womanhood and the body itself, right? So when you're exploring those, how did you balance that in your own girlhood? There's a scene where you talk about the age 13 and when your mother turns 13, and how that age was so monumental throughout so many lives of the different women in your book. Like, how do you balance that violence that happens in preserving the vulnerability and the innocence of Black girlhood and Black womanhood?
Mm-hmm. Violence is so much a part of the Black experience that it's almost impossible to extrapolate, unfortunately. Like, I talk about in the book how I've been to more funerals than I've been to baby showers, weddings, everything combined. And I had a friend who was not Black who said to me, "Oh, my grandmother died. I'm going to a funeral, my first one." And she was like 35.
Wow.
And I was like blown away. I've been to so many funerals. And so I think it's impossible. That violence penetrates the way we raise our children. It has everything to do with how we raise our children, because that we are always moving in anticipation of that violence or in defense of that violence, and that's been really useful for our survival. And I think it's really helpful. A big part of what I wanted to try to do in the book is understand how I was really curious about how to raise my own daughter by honoring this legacy of Blackness, but trying to take away the violence that we inflict upon our own children in trying to protect them.
Yeah.
And so much of how we build our culture and traditions are around violence and are really around grief, in the way that we mourn, in the way that we grieve. And that's a big part of that's our unifier and within our family. That's the only time I know everyone's going to show up.
Right.
Is when there's a funeral. If there's like a birthday party, maybe people are going to show up.
Yeah.
Even now, I'm going to Houston for my book tour, and my family's like, "We might be able to make it. I don't know. We have to work." But if there was a funeral, everyone's there.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like you stop what you're doing. Everyone honors death.
Yeah.
You know, and that's just a part of our culture.
Yeah, absolutely. What I also admire is you rewriting those norms or those traditions. There's something about the way you talk about artistry and motherhood and the Black collective voice, the Black woman's collective voice, that feels like it's rewriting that history in real time. So if someone is picking up this book, they have a way to tell their own story, and they feel like they can, okay, I can share the more difficult parts of my family history without shame, because that was one thing I felt like the book was completely void of. There was no kind of like backpedaling, or even though these memories are deep and painful and challenging, they're also like rich and beautiful and offer so much to the reader. Can you talk about, you've talked about wanting to interrupt parts of the tradition of motherhood, and I really was curious about the relationship between you and Camille, because that's like one of the only people, if I'm not mistaken, you actually interviewed and talked to that you preserved. What was that process like in pulling her into the book, because she had a completely different take on motherhood that was completely separate from the traditional societal expectations?
Right. Camille Billups is, she's passed away now, but she was an artist in the 80s and moving forward in New York City. And she, this is at a time where Black women are not being shown in museums. Also the late 70s, they weren't even allowed to go into the museums on certain days. They had to go in on the Black Day. And so she invited me over to her house one day, and I was interviewing her about kind of what it was like to be a Black woman artist during this time. And I was interviewing a lot of other Black artists. And she could only talk about this daughter who she had, who had died. And she said, I had a daughter. I gave her away when she was 4. I had to give her away. And I was like, okay, so I want to ask you about the 80s. And she kept just needing to tell me this. So I said, okay, I will surrender, and we're going to make this a whole different type of interview. Like, this is something else. She felt like she couldn't be her full self through motherhood. And she created this documentary called Finding Krista, where she kind of documents the process of giving her daughter up at 4 years old for adoption. And her mother and her aunties all wanted to adopt the girl. And she said no. And they were like, how can you give up a baby from our family? And she said, I just want to give her a chance to do something different than what our family has done. And what's interesting is Camille went on to make another documentary about her niece called Suzanne. And this documentary, Suzanne's mother was the one who wanted to adopt Krista. But Suzanne ends up becoming a heroin addict. Her father was very abusive. He was an alcoholic. He beat his wife. He abused his son. And you get to see what she meant, why she gave her daughter up for adoption, why she felt like she would rather take the risk with strangers than to keep her daughter in the family that she came from, and why she needed to get away from her family. And she left LA and went to Egypt, and then eventually settled in New York. But the idea is that she saw what was coming. She could anticipate the patterns. It was the same things that had been happening for generations within her family. And she felt like in order to break away from that, she had to also break away from motherhood. And I think that there's a lot of courage in that. And of course, people have different opinions about that, but I think she did what she had to do to survive. And she said, if I would have kept her, I would have died, and she would have died too.
Yeah. And it's like the old saying, like, life is so long, because I kept thinking about the fact that, one of the highest honors she got from Sundance was through that film, so her daughter still impacted her artistry, even though there was tension between them, there was all these things that happened. But at the end, her daughter was still part of it. Even in the conversation, you were interviewing her, her daughter was still part of that story.
Yeah, it didn't leave her. It never left her.
Yeah.
The child was physically gone, but she said that she was always in grief, and she just learned how to carry it and move with it. And I think that's a part of what it means to be a Black woman.
I agree completely. Like, this idea, you all touch on the complications. Well, you write beautifully about the complications between you and your own mother. I can't recall the name of the chapter, but you open it with, this is my friend Sasha. She has a mother like ours. And I related to that feeling of, I've also written a memoir, and I have a complicated relationship with my mother. And like, there's this idea of like, okay, when you don't have like the rosy picture of expectation of what a mother-daughter relationship should look like, and when it looks like something else, like, how do you hold on to that and still be a daughter that is still proud of what it is? Like, hold those complications close to your heart, but also hold your mother close to you too. And that you illustrate that really beautifully. So my question is, how did you balance honoring the woman in your family, in particular your mother, by also making space for your own voice and your own agency, and really being very clear about the type of mother you wanted to be and how you wanted to raise your daughter, Sophia?
My mother, she was a part of integration. So she learned very early how to hate herself.
Mm-hmm.
The neighborhood she lived in and grew up in was Third Ward, which was completely Black. But then she was bused to this other neighborhood where she went to school with all white people. And she said she couldn't even understand what they were saying. So in middle school, she dropped out. She just stopped going to school. She started to realize herself as other. When you're in your Black community, you don't realize that you're not worthy until you leave and someone tells you that you're different. And so when she learned that she was other, she really struggled. And I think this book, I wanted to understand my mother better. I wanted to understand how she got to be the way she was. And I think I feel much closer to her after writing the book.
Yeah.
I understand that where she came from, I'll never be able to fully comprehend. She grew up in extreme poverty and, no windows on the doors, people just climbing through the windows, no food, she's always, and food was always this kind of place of tension in our house. Like if she cooked and I was like, I don't want to eat that. She would say, you don't know what it's like to go to bed hungry.
Yeah.
You're going to eat like you don't have any gratitude.
Yeah.
And she worked so hard. She was also an affirmative action hire at the Union Pacific Railroad. And so she, as an affirmative action hire, all of the roles that she took on, she was the first Black woman to have those positions.
Wow.
And that meant, everybody knows what that means.
Yeah.
That means that she suffered.
Yeah.
And that means that every day she had to go in and she had to bite her tongue and she had to be demeaned and she had to smile and she was ignored and so many things. And then she had to come home and be my mom.
Yeah.
But of course she was completely drained. She couldn't mother me after dealing with all of that. And I could feel it, She would say it, firstly. Yeah. She would say, I've been at the job with them white folks all day. I can't.
You're right.
Right? Get somewhere and sit down and be quiet, basically, right? And we would do that, so it felt like I was an inconvenience. I always felt like I was in the way. I was an inconvenience. I don't want to disrupt her. She's working hard. But at the same time, I did need a mom. I did need more attention. So, trying to just deal with those complications, understanding that she didn't have anything else to give, but also understanding and accepting that I just needed more. So the book is kind of trying to keep that balance. And I have so much love and empathy and admiration for what she was able to do, because I'm a writer, I'm like sitting in a room by myself writing, and it's because of what she did. Yeah. It's because of what she sacrificed. So in that way, she's like given me this opportunity to also feel. She didn't have any time to reflect. She was just going and fighting and hustling and I get to be the one, and I have this kind of responsibility to be the one to look back, to reflect, to actually feel my feelings, to actually write about them and try to make sense of them. And I feel I'm honoring her in this way. Yeah. Of course, she's not happy about this book. She is like, you don't tell family business. This is crazy. Yes. But I think she also feels like someone cares about my life. Yeah. Someone has written about my life and memorialized me in this way. And so I think it's just a complicated dynamic.
Yeah, we can start a separate group chat, because my mom also has very complicated feelings about my memoir. So that's
you don't do that. You don't. Like she would sit me down. I'm sure you all know. She would sit me down before we got out of the car. Now, when we get in here, don't say anything. Don't answer any questions. Right. If she asks you, say no. If she asks you for some food, say you're not hungry, you're not thirsty. Like, you just get a whole speech every time. So the idea of writing a memoir is, it's wild.
Yes, and you did a whole archive, honey. You did.
I certainly did. I certainly did.
With that in mind, I've been, there's so many things I relate to, but I am curious to hear. What do you think about, or let me rephrase that. In what ways do you hope that your book challenges or expands readers' understanding of Black motherhood? Because I think there is something, I'm a Black woman, I see this and I just see reflections. That is not going to be the case for every reader. So if someone is new to this, new to your work, to your story, to Houston, to Third Ward, what do you hope they take away and sit with and explore?
I think beyond race and beyond even womanhood is just the complexities of our experiences as human beings. Yeah. We all carry so many ways of being within us. And I think that can be applied to any human experience. So, and I really hope that this book could be an intergenerational conversation. That's really my dream for the book, is that your granny's reading it and your mom is reading it and you're reading it, and getting to have conversations around how the generations shift. I mean, it's interesting how much has changed from between my grandmother and myself as far as the different ways that we lived. Like, she lived on a plantation, the same plantation where her ancestors had been enslaved. My mother was the first to live like in the city, in an urban environment. That's complete. It's like we all came from different countries, even. And then I grew up in like all white suburbia in Houston. So my mom had she had no idea the type of life that I was living. So we each kind of had to figure out how to relate to each other. And I think the book is honoring that part.
And just to add to that question, how do you hope your future generations, like your daughter and the other members of your family, what do you hope how they would respond to it? I guess they're responding now in real time, but what are your hopes for that?
Well, I think I hope that the book serves for the younger generation, especially Black girls, to see that we do have a history, we do have a culture, we do come from someplace, and we come from this very rich history. And I really try to unearth as much of that as I can, because so much of the Black experience, the violence of the Black experience, is that the idea is we don't come from anywhere.
Yeah.
Like, even, for example, across the Americas, there's a way that, for example, Jamaicans have been able to claim Jamaica as like their place. Cubans, they claim Cuba. In America, I don't really feel American until I leave and people say, hey, you're American. And I say, oh, yeah, I am. But I feel like after writing the book, I can say it with my whole chest and say, no, actually, we built this.
Yeah.
This is our home. And we do have a culture and we do have practices, and kind of bringing all of that together and understanding that we've been here for a very long time.
Yeah, that's beautiful. One of my favorite parts of the book was also the character Pops at the end, and how he was like this quiet, careful, study, like observant man that like figured out all the pieces at the end. Can you talk about the men in the book? From Pops to your father, and how they shaped the stories and came alive.
Yeah. So Pops is my grandfather. My grandmother had 11 children with 9 different men, and then she married a man who had no kids and didn't have any kids with him, which I still am she's just such a character that I am in awe of, and just I'm like, how did you do that? How do you date, first of all, with 11 kids, and how do you marry someone and be like, these are all my kids, they're now your kids, and I'm not going to have any kids with you?
Because your grandma was fly. Yes. Like, listen, we need her. This is her book, but we also need some notes. Yes, okay.
Exactly. I was always, when I got pregnant and I wasn't married, and I went to her and I was like, is anybody ever going to love me? Am I ever going to find someone to love me and my daughter? And she said, baby, they always come. Yeah. And I said, I think about that, and I was like, what? Like, that's not what I wanted to hear. But actually, she's right. They do, in fact, always come.
I love it.
And so she met my grandfather, and my grandfather had been watching her for years. He knew all of her men. Yep. He used to hang out on the corner at the corner store. He was an alcoholic. And he knew all her men. He knew everywhere she'd ever lived. And so when he approached her to pursue her, he brought those memories with him. And I think it was so flattering for her, this woman who is, by all other accounts, outside of the neighborhood, completely disposable life. And this man said, hey, actually, I've been watching you, and you have a life that I think is worthy of witness, and I'm here. And he's a wonderful man, and he comes in at the end of the book, and he fathers all of her children. And my mother never met her father. And it isn't until I'm a full adult that my mom started calling him dad. And I remember when she did it, and I was like, that's strange. And she said, why not? You know? And this very much was her father. It was the only man she had ever, that was ever consistent. So even though we had this kind of way of making sure men were marginalized within the family and making sure they stayed quiet, he was quiet, but he had so much power. Actually, he had a quiet power and presence. And you know, the men are not so present on the page, but they are really powerful figures within the family, of course. My father was really important to my mother's pursuit of the American dream. She needed him to reach this pinnacle, you know, that she was seeking. She needed the house, she needed the man, the kids, the dog, the fence. She really wanted that, and he was her way. My mother was living with her grandmother after she dropped out of school. Her grandmother took her in and raised her and really loved her and showed her what love was. But her grandmother, was living with her son. And her son which was my mom's uncle, and he told her, the day you graduate high school, you need to find a place to live. And so she married my dad right out of high school. And my dad, you know, he came from a more affluent Black family, like an entrepreneurial Black family. And he married her, and that changed her life. You know, I don't know where she would be if she hadn't have had that option.
Yeah.
And so the men in the book are also, they're these places that allow for transitions.
Yeah.
Also, my grandmother couldn't have bought a house if she hadn't have been with this man who was a
Dr.
veteran.
Pepper.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
who was a veteran, Mr. Pepper in the book. He was a veteran, so they were able to get a VA loan. And but he was also a veteran from the war, so that, you know, that comes with a lot of trauma. But yeah, the men are always these pivotal kind of important figures that help shift the path that these women take. And my father was very much the love of my life.
I also want to hear more about collecting these stories. Did you interview everyone individually? I'm thinking in particular the daughters section. So did you, or were you referring to journals? I know at some point in the book you talk about the archive and how it was challenging because a lot of the archive was, you know, either from storms or records weren't kept in the best of order. You did DNA searches. You did a lot of things to get the information. How was your family's response, and were they open and forthcoming to tell you information so you could draft these things? And did you share it with them afterwards, after you drafted? Did you get permission, or you just wrote?
Yeah, that's a good question. I started with my grandmother, who is she allows the permission. Mm-hmm. And when she started talking, then I started interviewing her daughters.
Okay.
And I would say, well, I talked to Granny. And they were like, Granny talked to you? And then they would say, well, okay, well, if Granny's, you know, they wanted to add on, like, if Granny said something to you, then I can say something.
Okay.
And then I was kind of strategic in which sisters I went to first.
Okay.
The eldest.
Reliable.
First, yes, yep. Because Betty Jean had her so young, they were more like sisters.
Okay.
And that's right hand. And then I kind of worked around my mother, who was quite resistant. Mm-hmm. But I knew that my mother would want to correct the record. So I said, well, you know, I don't have to speak to you, but I did talk to everyone else. So that means that they're telling your story. And of course, she's like, no, they got it all wrong, you know? And so she comes in with hers. Mm-hmm. So yes, I did interview them all separately. Mm-hmm. And what's funny is there were so many things that they didn't know amongst each other as sisters growing up, sleeping in the same bed, all of them sleeping in one bed. And there's so much they didn't know about each other, things that they were going through that they never shared. So in reading the book, they're also getting to know each other in ways that maybe they couldn't have otherwise.
Yeah.
And that feels really beautiful to me, but also really heartbreaking that they had to carry all of this weight by themselves without getting to share it amongst each other. After I wrote it, I then shared it after I completed the book, way before publishing. So first draft, I sent it to them individually. And there were so many different responses. It's hard to read about yourself. There was only one sister, Artemis, in the book who was like, I love it. I have no shame about my story.
You know what? I'm gonna let y'all read Artemis's part because I thought that would be the one that they would.
Me too, and I went to her first because I was like, "Oh my God, I'm so scared to
gangster.
I'm so scared to share this." With her. And she was like, "I love it. I wouldn't take nothing from my journey." Very Maya Angelou. She was just like, "I don't have any shame." And then she sent it to her daughter, and then her daughter called me crying and said, I understand my mother now. Thank you so much.
Oh,
for
that's
this,
so beautiful.
You know?
That's so beautiful. That's so fearless, so free. And I think that's the power of writing, having like a family historian, writing your own story without even without the intention of ever being published, like having it just for your family,
Yeah.
It's such a a liberating thing in your heart, in your mind. That, you know what? That's amazing.
I know. I was
that.
so shocked. But some of the others were like, you got it wrong. Too much cursing in the book. My religious auntie. There were just so many different.
Was that Carrie? Who said too much cursing?
That was the baby.
The baby. Oh, okay.
Very
that
religious.
Makes sense. I feel like I know your whole family.
Yeah.
I'm like, who said that?
And then what was funny about my Aunt Daddy's girl, I don't use their names because I feel like I had to give them their privacy. But Daddy's girl didn't like the way I wrote about her father.
Oh, that's interesting.
She said, you got my father all wrong. Her dad left her when she was like 3.
Yeah.
And she was the one who would wait by the door for him. For years, she would wait by the door for him. He never came back.
Wow.
And her defense of this man.
Yeah.
All these years later, I was stunned.
Yeah.
I was like, what did I get wrong? She was like, my dad.
Wow.
I was like,
wait, what? Yeah. But Daddy's girl.
Yeah. She still holds this kind of protection for him, which is really beautiful. But yeah, they all had different responses. But I think ultimately, they were all really happy to read about their mother.
Yeah.
Their mother being honored.
It's so beautiful. I want to ask about the house and how you made 5010 such a strong character in the book. It reminded me a lot of The Yellow House by Sarah Broom.
I love that book.
I love that book too. You are giving Sarah, this is the energy. They can be right next to each other. It's just so good.
Very Gulf of Mexico, Louisiana, Houston.
Yes.
Very similar.
Yeah. You both are just amazing writers. And so I loved that. I loved how you really had the book, the house stand out and be its own character and something that, it's like you always went back to it in some way or another. It anchored in the book in a really beautiful way. Can you talk about that and just, again, sharing your craft process? Were you writing in certain images? Were you, again, just pulling it from the stories that were being told, your own memories of going in the fridge and things like that?
Yeah.
It was really, it was very visual.
Yeah. So 5010 in the book is my grandmother's house. And I go back to it because it's the place we always go back to.
Yeah.
It's where everything happens. It's the center. It's where you learn all your lessons. It's the place where you go when you need help, when you're down, when you want to celebrate. I had this moment where I was like, I'm going to buy a box of books and send it to 5010. So it'll be there when everyone gets there. But my grandmother passed away and I was like, oh no, it doesn't, it's not the same. I had this moment of kind of forgetting that she wasn't there. But it's this house that it's like it's alive. You know, everybody has had to live there at some point, and it's not a big house. It's 2-bedroom house, you know, but everybody has had to live there. Everyone calls there. If you get arrested, everyone has the number. Everyone knows this number by heart.
Yeah.
The number everyone, it never changes. It hasn't changed in like 50 years. And it's our safe place. It's the only place in the world where these people are always welcome.
Yeah.
There is no other place for these people in my family where they know they can go. You don't have to call. You don't have to make an appointment. There's always food. You know, it has everything you need. People store their things there. People hide their cars there when they're about to get repoed. Like people, it's you can call there, collect. You know, everyone's mail goes there. Everyone's mail goes there. Everyone's registered to vote there. It's just, especially when you're living in precarity.
Yeah.
When you're living in this place where you don't always know where you're going to live, you're having to move a lot. You don't know, not everyone owns a home, but this home is always there. And that's something that's just been a life raft of a house, you know, and it's gone through so many hurricanes. And my grandmother never leaves her house in a hurricane or anything. She's like, I'm staying with the house. Like she has to stay with her baby.
Yeah.
And she's always been okay.
So amazing. I want you to tell us about the things that you maybe left out. Were there any things like on the cutting room floor when you were working with your editor, or maybe as you know, you were writing, you're like, okay, initially this felt right, but now it's no longer part of this narrative. What was like left behind?
Oh, there were so many things I wanted to put in this book, but I was like, just write another book.
Yeah, that part. Yeah.
So, actually, my daughter told me that.
Yeah,
she was
that's
like,
amazing.
Mommy, just write another book. like it's so easy. But you know, the book was. You can write. I could write this book for 10 years. You know, there's so much history around Black womanhood in this country. Some things that I had to take out were some other figures. I wanted to expand. I wanted to make longer, especially the tributaries. I write about Betty Davis, the funk musician. I could have given her whole own section based off of the contributions that she's given us. I was curious about so many other women that I wanted to write about. I wanted to write about Nina Simone.
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to give her own space. I wanted to write a full chapter about Quincy Jones' mother, who appears in the book, but just briefly in talking about mental health, which is something that we don't speak about openly in the Black community. And his mother had been committed, along with Malcolm X's mother, and my mother has her own experiences with mental health. And so I wanted to kind of expand on these women who had struggled with that, and that's why I really wanted Nina Simone to have her own section. So there were a lot of women I couldn't include that I wanted to, that ended up not making it, that I can remember right now. One thing I fought for was the prelude.
Oh, yes.
Me and my editor fought about the prelude.
Oh, what was the tension? I'm
well,
glad you won.
I did. He thought the tone was different. And it is. It's got a kind of lyrical...
But I mean, it's intentional, no? Like, isn't that the point?
Well, he's kind of like, when a reader opens the book, and I do agree with him, you want to just drop them into the story. You don't want to give them a voice. And they also... People read the first page of the book and get an idea of what the book is about. Yeah. And that doesn't necessarily provide that.
Yeah.
Should I read it?
Oh, yes.
Should I read it quickly?
That's actually a great idea.
This is just the opening prelude. And I open the book with, if you don't understand the history of African American women, you don't understand the history of America, which was kind of a guiding light for me understanding the necessity of writing the book.
Yes. Toni Morrison.
Yes, Toni Morrison, thank you. Listen, when I say water bearer, I mean carrying all that weight, with calloused hands, dry mouth, split ends, and a back that don't bend except to pray. I'm talking about balance, flat-footed strides, grounded so deep into the earth, look like she's sinking when she actually sprouting, 'cause she of it. Sure of a path nobody but God can see. I'm talking about no map, no paving, no clue where to find it, but somehow she gon' get it. I'm talking sweat above her lip and mud beneath her nails. You know who I'm talking about. Big mama nem, grandmama nem, mother dear, granny, nan, abuela, tea lady, meemaw, mommy, mother, your nanny, your mammy, your punching bag, your liberator, your organizer, your siren, grantor of your manhood, affirmer of your masculinity, the soft, warm, pink place for you to deposit your darkness. Go in broken and come out whole. When I say water, I mean life force. I mean ancestral inheritance, the water of the womb, all that mama tried to shield you from, but you got it honest. I mean bloodline. All that she dare not say and you bet not ask came to you through that water. Water so pure, don't tell no lies. That water damn near broke her back, but she died before she let somebody take what belongs to her. That water's all she has to call her own, and she'll give it all to you and won't even burden you with the tale of how she made it across the valley. Not nobody can imagine what she saw, what she felt, what she stepped on and over to get there. Feet so swole look like they might bust, hardened souls tender to the touch, still sensitive enough to feel moisture's gesture, subtle as a whisper, certain as forsythia. Before you can even smack your lips and suck your tongue, she's already at the mouth of the river. She's carrying all that heavy, parsing out what you need from what you thought you wanted, taking a whole bunch of nothing and making it enough. All you gotta do is trust her with your whole throat when you lean your head back and open up wide. And then maybe, if you live long enough, one day, on an ordinary day, after all those yesterdays, you yourself will try to find your way to that well, to that river, to that delta, and only then will you be able to look at her and ask, Mama, are you thirsty?
Okay, I just got goosebumps. Yes, we can clap for that.
Thank you.
Anything that opens up with listen, you like, okay, yes. Like that's what it gave me. I was like, let me stand up at attention, let me listen. And that closing, it's so lyrical, so beautiful. And it sounded familiar to me. Like I just felt that. Like
Thank you.
you know, and then being able to extend that to your own when you're ready, when it's possible. Like I truly believe in the line, like life is long, and you're seeing that like life is so long, you just never know where you're going to begin and where you're going to end.
Right.
You know,
Right.
So
Thank you.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that beautiful reading, and we're going to open it up for questions. Actually, we're going to open it up for signing. So we're going to shift over to the signing. Can we do another round of applause for Sasha?